Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Ready to tackle a tough one today.
Absolutely.
We're going to be unpacking mass murder.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to think about it, but
It's important.
it's really important to try to understand.
Sadly, it feels more and more relevant these days, you know?
Right.
Like, it's just,
It's becoming much more common.
yeah, it's,
So, we have to kind of wrap our heads around it.
yeah.
So we've got a Wikipedia article someone sent in, so we're going to take that as our jumping off point
Great.
and go from there.
Sounds good.
So, very first thing, we always got to start with a definition. What is mass murder?
Right.
And the Wikipedia article says, killing a number of people, usually in a single location, over a short period.
It's that concentration of the violence, I think,
Right.
that really sets it apart. That sudden outburst from, other types of killing, like serial killings, for example.
Right.
Very different.
Like that awful Germanwings Flight 9525 tragedy that just brings home that whole single location short period.
Absolutely. And what's terrifying about that, too, is there's often no warning, no chance for intervention.
Right.
And it's really about trying to figure out, how to prevent these sorts of things. And in the U.S., at least, there's a specific legal definition, 3 or more killings in one go.
Right.
Without a cooling off period, I think they call it. So it helps, track these events statistically, legally.
So we kind of have a handle on what it is, but I think the much bigger question
Yeah.
that we all want to know is why.
Right.
What would make someone do this?
It's the question, isn't it?
Right.
And there's no easy answer, unfortunately. Sometimes it's revenge, in cases of domestic or workplace violence.
Okay.
Other times it's a desire for notoriety, like the Columbine High School shooting,
Right.
where the perpetrators, they seem to crave that attention,
Right.
the attention they thought they would get.
Right. And of course, then there's terrorism, which is also in the article.
Yeah.
And you've got things like 9/11 or the Beslan school siege, the 2015 Paris attacks,
Yeah.
all these just awful reminders of how mass murder can be used to create fear and push a political agenda.
What's so chilling about terrorism is that it's so calculated.
Right.
A lot of these attacks are meticulously planned to cause as much damage and panic as possible.
Wow.
It's a form of psychological warfare.
Okay, so we've been talking about sort of lone wolf attacks, but mass murder isn't always about a single person, is it?
You're absolutely right. Cults, for example, are a tragic example of that.
Right.
The Wikipedia article mentions the Jonestown Massacre.
Right.
Over 900 people dead. These groups show how powerful manipulation and coercion can be.
Wow.
You get a charismatic leader, they can really exploit people's vulnerabilities, right?
Right.
Twist ideology. And it leads to these horrific ends.
So it's not always about individual madness. It can be about groupthink and really messed up belief systems too.
Absolutely. Understanding the psychology of it all for individuals and groups is just so important. It's about recognizing warning signs, behavior patterns, ideologies. I mean, those are key to prevention.
So all that said, how do we stop this? What are we doing to prevent these tragedies?
Well, law enforcement's come a long way since Columbine.
Okay.
They've really shifted their tactics. It might surprise you to learn that.
Okay.
The focus now is on immediate action. And not just by first responders, bystanders too.
Oh, wow.
It's about neutralizing the threat as quickly as possible to save lives.
So not waiting for SWAT teams anymore.
Right, that old wait and contain approach that's changed.
Wow.
Every second counts. So police departments now, they train for immediate engagement.
Okay.
So that means prioritizing stopping the shooter as quickly as possible, even if it means going in without backup from specialized units.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure on those first responders.
Absolutely. And sadly, even with these tactical shifts, the article points out that mass shootings are still a huge problem. Yeah.
In 2020 alone, the U.S. had a record number.
It's really scary.
Yeah, it's sobering.
Yeah.
It really highlights that there's no easy solution here.
Right. It feels like such a deep-rooted problem.
Exactly. And this is where the article brings up a really interesting point about how we categorize these events.
Okay.
We tend to use labels like school shooting, workplace violence, terrorism.
Right.
And while those can be helpful to understand the context, they can also box in our thinking.
So we might miss the bigger picture, the common threads between these events because we're so focused on the label.
Yes, exactly. And even the way we define mass killings has evolved.
Okay.
It used to be all about the body count, but now we factor in things like time, place, and method.
Right.
And all of that shapes our understanding, even our emotional response to the event.
It's almost like the words we use create a filter on how we see these events.
Right. And that's why critical thinking is crucial here.
Okay.
We need to question those labels, the assumptions behind them.
Think about a time you heard about one of these events. What stuck with you? Was it the label the media used or something else?
That's a really good point. So instead of getting stuck on the specifics of each case, we should be looking for the bigger picture. Like what's going on in society that leads to this kind of violence?
Exactly. What are the societal factors, the warning signs we might be missing? Can we create a culture that values empathy and talking things out over hatred and aggression?
Those are really tough questions.
They are, but they're the ones we need to grapple with if we truly want to get to the root of the issue.
Yeah.
Preventing mass murder means looking at individual psychology, societal issues, and even how the media shapes our perceptions.
Speaking of media, we can't ignore their role in all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
The way these tragedies are reported has a huge impact on how the public sees them, even on policy decisions.
It's true. And it's natural for the media to want to understand why these things happen.
Right.
But there's a risk of accidentally glorifying the perpetrator, feeding their desire for notoriety, or even inspiring copycat attacks.
You mentioned copycat attacks. Could you explain what that means in this context?
Sure. Sadly, there have been cases where someone already considering a similar act sees the attention a mass shooting gets, and it pushes them over the edge.
Wow.
They imitate what they see, almost like a terribly misguided form of inspiration.
That's awful.
Wow.
So it's like this awful cycle. The media covers these events, tries to dissect them, but that can actually make the problem worse.
It's a difficult balance.
Yeah.
The article highlights the importance of seeking out diverse perspectives, going beyond the headlines and easy answers.
Right.
Don't just accept the narrative you're given. Dig deeper. Think for yourself.
Right. It's easy to just like follow whatever the headlines are saying.
Yeah, exactly. We need to be savvy consumers of information, especially online.
Right.
Where misinformation, just spreads like wildfire. Ask yourself, like, who's telling the story? What's their agenda?
Right.
What perspectives might be missing from this?
It's about being informed, but also being critical and remembering that these situations are incredibly complex. There's rarely one, simple explanation.
Hit the nail on the head. And, we have to be willing to wrestle with some uncomfortable truths about our own society,
Right.
systems and structures that might allow this kind of violence to happen.
Like what? Like, give me an example.
Well, think about, access to mental health care, how we handle conflict resolution,
right?
Even the narratives that we build about different groups of people, right?
Oh,
These
yeah.
are all factors.
They all play a role.
They do.
Wow, you've given us a lot to think about. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the media potentially glorifying these perpetrators. And, it seems like a tough line to walk, right? Like trying to understand their motives without giving them the attention they might have craved.
It's a delicate balance to strike. And, on the one hand, the media has a responsibility to report accurately and provide context, but we also have to be careful about giving a platform to dangerous ideologies or a desire for infamy.
So how do we find that balance? Like, report on these tragedies responsibly without making the problem worse?
Well, some experts, believe in minimizing the use of the perpetrator's name and image, focusing more on the victims and their stories.
Right.
Others argue for a more analytical approach, like looking at, the broader societal factors like we talked about, without sensationalizing the violence itself. So there's no, one size fits all.
Yeah, there's no easy answer, but it's encouraging that at least we're having these conversations. We're aware of the dangers and trying to find a better way forward.
I agree. And that's what's so powerful about these deep dives. We're examining the information, considering these different points of view and having, hopefully a thoughtful discussion, right? All of that helps us build a more nuanced understanding of this incredibly difficult topic.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by these events, feel powerless in the face of such senseless violence. But like you said, having these conversations, being informed and engaged, those are ways we can actually make a difference.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, right?
Right.
The more we understand about these realities of mass murder, the better equipped we are to advocate for change, challenge harmful ideas, and, create a safer world.
This deep dive has been a journey.
It has.
We've tackled definitions, motives, the limitations of categorization, but more importantly, we've started to break down that silence that too often surrounds this issue,
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't the end of the conversation. It's just the beginning.
Right.
There's always more to learn, more to understand, more to question.
To everyone listening, Keep asking those tough questions. Keep searching for those diverse perspectives, and never, never forget the victims as we work toward a future free from this kind of violence.
Because every life lost to these senseless acts, it's a tragedy, and it's a reminder of why we do this work. And it starts with understanding, empathy, and refusing to accept the unacceptable.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for walking us through this very complex, very challenging topic. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious out there.